So good morning, everyone, and welcome to Zoom Palestine. I don't see the Facebook moving. Oh, now it's moving. Okay. So today is a very special day because Thursday commemorated the 20th anniversary of the martyrdom and great sacrifice of Rachel Corrie, who is the same age as my daughter and actually looks like her. So we're going to open up with a beautiful song written to commemorate Rachel Corrie. Let's see if I can find it here. See if I can open. Here we go. And here's the beautiful song commemorating. It's called "I'd Rather Be Dancing," and it commemorates Rachel Corrie by Jim Page.
I was always the one. I could never stand idly by and watch while the bullies beat up on the weak ones. I had to do something to try, and I never gave up on people. The way could be better somehow. Morality's compass, you gave it to me, and I still follow it now. Well, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't get it out of my mind. The pictures, the stories, the plight of the people in occupied Palestine, and how my government makes me complicit with the political aid that they send. So I packed up my bags and I headed to Rafah to work with the ISM. And I'd rather be dancing and falling in love. Oh, but I could just watch from the distance, and what am I made of? Mama, these people are so good to me. They treat me like I'm one of their own. They feed me and see to my needs, and let me sleep in their homes. And Papa, their lives are so hard. The gunshots every night, the strip searches, the humiliations. Papa, it just isn't right. Well, I can feel my white skin privilege is there in my American face. I could wave my passport around like a flag, and I would be safe in this place. For these child soldiers of Israel, they look like the boys back home. And if it wasn't for American money, they'd have to leave these people alone. And I'd rather be dancing to Pat Benatar. Oh, but somebody has to do something about it, and here we are. Tractors are coming today. They're like tanks with bulldozer blades. The name on the side says Caterpillar, and that means they're American made. Well, I am American too, and I'll be where everybody can see. So if they want to run over those houses today, they're gonna have to run with me. Well, it's dangerous taking a stand, but it's dangerous running away. And sometimes you have to face up to the danger. There is just no other way. But there are such beautiful dreams I've seen in the eyes of a child. If I can just make one little difference, then I think my life is worthwhile. And I'd rather be dancing, but instead I'm saying goodbye. We'll meet again when it's over, don't cry. And I'd rather be dancing rather be. And someday we'll dance in the world as peaceful and free.
Wow, what a beautiful song. I cried listening to it. Born 1979, same age as my daughter. And she actually lives with my daughter too. So this is a very difficult program for me to do. I'm welcome Ale on Facebook, and welcome on Zoom, Palestine. I think it's Sarah. Thank you for coming. So I'll play a little video in case you don't have much background on Rachel Corrie, you don't remember the details. Let's play this short video remembering.
I'm here because I care. I'm here because children everywhere are suffering.
Time that I've been here, children have been shot and killed.
She's trying to stop the Israeli forces in the house and stopped her. Those did not stop the the Supreme Court. Ruled that it was just part of war, and we're going to see another video that tells us from the parents' point of view who went to Israel and tried to achieve justice.
Paul J. Cindy and Craig.
Let's start.
Welcome to Reality Asserts Itself on the Real News Network. I'm Paul J. Cindy and Craig Corrie are the parents of Rachel Corrie, a 23-year-old American peace activist who was crushed to death in Gaza by an Israeli bulldozer on March 16th, 2003, about 12 years ago, almost to the day. Rachel was undertaking nonviolent direct action to protect the home of a Palestinian family from demolition. They're also the co-founders of the Rachel Corrie Foundation for Peace and Justice. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
First of all, I know it's been 12 years, but
Now it's 20 years.
as a parent, the searing pain of a loss of a kid, 12 years probably doesn't mean very much.
No, I think you don't get better, you get stronger. The pain doesn't go away, you just get capable of handling it. And one of the great things for us, we've gone around the country, we meet, there's so many families have had losses like ours. But it's good for us that Rachel was doing exactly what she wanted to do when she was killed. And she was telling us what we could do. You know, she said, come here, come here. And she wanted us to see Gaza. She wanted people to work out for the people of Gaza to try and make a better world there. So she really gave us, we inherited from our daughter, a cause and some friends and, you know, something that we could do in human women.
I think sometimes that Rachel's story, when they meet us for the first time, people feel troubled, and a lot of their pain hits them. In a way, we're living with it all the time. It's, you know, it's something. It was the worst day of our lives, March 16th, 2003, and we continue to live with that. And I remember there was a time when Craig and I were driving from Washington State, where we were living, to the Midwest to see our family. It's a drive that our families took many, many times. And there was a beautiful moon over the mountains as we were going across the Cascade Mountains. And I wondered if anything would look as beautiful to me again as it had before Rachel was killed. And then somehow, and I can't tell you exactly the point when it happened, all of the color came back into my life. And I think probably for any people that experience a loss, that there are these periods that you have to go through. And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that that color is back, that I enjoy life. And I am I wish that some of the things that we're working on, that the problems would go away so we could work on something else. But we're so supported and invigorated by the people who come and are joining in this work.
And the work we're talking about is you've been pursuing a legal case, suing the Israeli government, the Israeli army. Just quickly for people that don't know the basic story, just tell us what happened.
That's part of our work, but, and Rachel was killed on March 16, 2003. She went to the Gaza Strip with a group called the International Solidarity Movement. They're a group of people that were formed because the Palestinians had wanted, and the UN had called for some human rights observers to be in that area. The US vetoed that. And so some people thought, well, they don't have to be with the UN, it could be anybody. And so people from around the world were going there. And Rachel wasn't in the first wave, kind of the second or third, but she went in January of 2003. And she headed down to Rafah, I think partly because Gaza is one of the most forsaken places in the world, and Rafah in Gaza was one of the most forsaken. And she lived with those families. You know, she was often slept in their houses. In the house in front of which she was killed, she was standing in front of a wall as a bulldozer came at it. And but she knew the family. She worked with the older boy on his English, and he tried to help her with her Arabic and stuff. So they were friends. But the Israelis were clearing a swath of land between the Gaza Strip and Egypt, not Israel, but Egypt. And when I say clearing, they're pushing down people's homes. And these homes have several extended, one extended family, so they might have 30 people in one of these buildings. But in the particular home that Rachel was standing in front of that day, there were two brothers and their 5 children, and the wives, 5 children. And these bulldozers would come up that day to the activists' feet, pushing, and these are huge bulldozers, D9, D10 bulldozers, D9 in her case, armored, 65-ton bulldozers. They come up right to the activists' feet, pushing their dirt, and then they would stop. But at 5 o'clock, a bulldozer came up towards Rachel, and right behind her was an Israeli house, and it didn't stop. It went over her, and her friends say, without picking up its blade, backed up. She somehow survived for moments after that. She was between the tracks of the bulldozer, is clear from pictures we've seen. And so she said to her friend Alice, I think my back is broken. But that was her last words.
What the Israelis were doing, some people have described as collective punishment. And it's important to say hundreds of Palestinians were killed in the same area, and many of them were children.
The Human Rights Watch report, Raising Rafah, reported that from 2000 to 2004, a tenth of the population of Rafah in southern Gaza lost their homes. There were over 1,600 homes demolished. And this was more than collective punishment. It was certainly many people suffered. But it was a very deliberate policy to take control of more of that area. As Craig said, it was along the Egyptian border with Gaza, not the Israeli border. The Philadelphia corridor is a very narrow route that by treaty, the Israeli military had access to. And but it was very narrow, this Philadelphia corridor, but plenty large for their equipment to move through it. But what they kept doing was to take row after row of houses. This was not directed at families that had particularly had any violence towards the military at all, although you'll read that sometimes.
Well, that's what the Israelis have said, that there were snipers and there were various other people shooting at Israeli soldiers.
Yeah.
And this is why they're knocking down houses.
This was during the height of the Second Intifada. And certainly there was resistance there and there was violence there, but I think it gets very distorted in the reports, actually, because there were actually more Israeli soldiers, for example, killed in the West Bank during that period than there were in Gaza. the clearing that was happening, you have to remember that there were 8,000 settlers in Gaza at the time. And I forget the number, but between 20 and 22 settlements, I think around 22 settlements. A lot of them were in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. One of the things that made Rachel really sad was that children that she lived with who were living under the most terrible conditions. Many of them hadn't seen the ocean. Craig and I have been there. The Mediterranean Sea is very nearby. It's beautiful. And when I went there, when emotionally it was just really, really hard. When I would finally get up north and be able to see the Mediterranean, it was like a breath of fresh air. And Rachel felt sad because the children she was living with hadn't seen it. They'd be 5, 6, 7 years old, but because the settlements had access to the ocean, not the families, not the Palestinian families, there was this limitation. So Israeli policy at the time was to take more and more of this area. There's a famous quote from a colonel, I believe, Yom Tov Samia, on Israeli army radio that said, no matter what happens, each time there's any resistance, we need to take another row of houses. So there was definitely an expansionist plan with that whole area at the time. I just think it's important for people to know that it wasn't like they targeted one house there and took down that house for punitive reasons. They were taking all the houses in the area. In our court case in Israel, our attorney asked the deputy battalion commander, how far did the Philadelphia corridor go? And he said, up to the next row of houses. I think was his response.
Means it keeps getting bigger as we knock down houses.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think one of the things, as you say, they would like you to think they're terrorists in those homes. That the home that Rachel stood in front of, the one she was killed in, that family later came to the United States, or the younger brother, his wife, and a baby that was born after Rachel was killed. Well, to get here, they had to go to Tel Aviv to get a visa. And so sometime later, after Rachel was killed, the house has been knocked down, but even after that, the Israeli military give a pass to this family that was in the house to go walk freely in Tel Aviv for a day, go to the U.S. Embassy. And of course, the U.S. Embassy does not give a pass to a Palestinian male, 34 years old, easily to come to the United States. But they got that, they traveled in the United States. And so Israel and United States had nothing against the family that Rachel stood in front of their house, but Rachel was killed.
When Rachel left to join it's under the auspices of the International Solidarity Movement, right?
Yeah.
What motivates her to go? I mean, a lot of people, on the left and generally, who see what's wrong with what's going on, not just with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but many such things, they don't get up and go, and they don't get up and put their body on the line.
Rachel, I think from a very early age, was somebody I thought was really remarkable as I look back on it. She refused to look away from marginalized people. So she wrote as a 12-year-old about the homeless in Olympia, our hometown, and how we would give them $1 so we didn't really have to look at them, how we would support them from afar, but didn't want to be close enough to smell their breath. She worked with mentally ill people when she was in high school and through college. And so I think that it makes, in a very broad sense, some sense for her then to choose to go because there really is nobody more marginalized than somebody in Rafah. Specifically, I think the attacks on September 11th, she realized that there was there's something going on. She's aware of the world like most of us. And she didn't buy George W. Bush's excuse that they hate us for our freedom. So what she literally said is, I would like to go somewhere and see what it's like to be on the other side of my tax dollars in U.S. foreign policy. So she found out about the International Solidarity Movement. some of her professors had been to Israel. One was Israeli, had been in the Israeli military, and also then was one of the founders of Women in Black, who in Israel stand silently in black, trying to bring attention to the occupation. So she had some knowledgeable people. She learned Arabic. She took that in school before she went. So she knew people that were knowledgeable in that area, and young people that had been before, but eventually she went.
Did you have a sense of how dangerous it might be?
You know, Craig and I were living in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time because of a job change for Craig. And I remember when Rachel first told me that this is what she was thinking about doing, I went to the internet and started to look for some other options. We have family connections in India. I knew that she had a really strong need to do meaningful things in her life. And she had an international focus, of international bent when she was very privileged. I mean, she felt like a very privileged person growing up in Olympia, Washington, and in a middle-class family where she had lots of opportunity. She was able to travel to Russia as a high school student. She was there for 6 weeks. We had exchange students in our home, and we had, after the Soviet Union broke up, we had an exchange, or a student from Russia that came with her teacher and several other students. And then Rachel was one of several high school students that went back and spent 6 weeks in Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk in Eastern Russia. And so she had that experience, and that really changed her outlook, because here, you know, there was all this negative in our media and so forth, and coming from our government about the Soviet Union and about Russia. And then Rachel met the people and fell in love with the people there. And after that, she spent some time in Belize. She had a high school trip to Eastern Europe, you know, so her perspective at a very young age had become pretty global. And she just had a strong need to be out there in the world. That said, she didn't want to frighten us. She did educate us. I think, you know, Rachel really brought us to the issue. I think we were like a lot of American families who had always heard about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It was always in the news, particularly the Jewish-Israeli perspective. And that's the one that we identified with. I read stories to the kids about young people during the Holocaust who were hidden away and survived, and about the ones who didn't. So that's where we were coming from, and the Palestinians were really removed from our experience. So she was educating me even across the country. Before she traveled, she was sending me links to websites and that kind of thing. I remember her writing at one point, if you look at this, you know, you might become a little fearful. And I know she didn't want us to be afraid. But she said nobody in the international solidarity movement had been killed. There had been an injury or so, but nobody had died in that. And so, you know, she was trying to help us along. And I remember her first phone call to us in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I think that was a point when Craig and I really couldn't even talk about it with each other after that call, because I could hear the trembling in her voice when she was in Rafah. And she said, "Can you hear that? Can you hear that?" And it was tanks that were going up and down this Philadelphia corridor. And she was actually in the house that she stood in front of when she was killed, making that phone call, and it was nighttime. And I remember feeling worried then. But also, as she was there longer, what we saw happening through her writing and through her communications is she was okay. And she was telling wonderful stories about the people that she was staying with. And we saw her confidence grow in her ability to be there and to do the work that needed to be done. And she was working with the Children's Parliament. She went, connected with women's organizations, was living with these families and working with other internationals who had come for the same reasons that she had come. I I remember when we finally made it to Gaza in September of 2003, and we went to the General Union of Palestinian Women, and Fatima, the woman who was there, so proudly pulled out for me a note that Rachel had left on International Women's Day. We went and visited families, and we have actually in a book of Rachel's writing, Nyla's letter, a young Palestinian woman that Rachel had written a letter into her journal, and it was all about how the world should be ashamed of this, and how Nyla should hold on to her dreams, and of how she had all this ability to be, you know, any of these things that she wanted to be, and how much Rachel was learning from Nyla and people like her about the human spirit and about dignity, just how much Rachel had learned there. So I think in terms of our anxiety about it all, of course we were concerned. I was particularly concerned when the war with Iraq was starting, and there was a lot of uncertainty about what that would bring. But we saw how meaningful this was, and we were learning from her. I told you that we had heard about this issue forever, but all of a sudden, here's our daughter. We know what a careful observer she is. We know how careful she is about her words, and this is what she's sharing. This is the picture that she's sharing with Craig and me, and also with our extended family and her friends, that just completely change our view of the whole situation.
Okay, we're going to continue talking. Please join us for the next segment of our interview with Craig and Cindy Corrie on Reality Asserts Itself on the Real News Network.
Wow, that was really fascinating to hear the parents. And what we're going to, the parents went to Israel to fight a court case to hold Israel responsible for her death, and this is what happened to them, unfortunately. So we'll see what happened with the parents.
Corrie was one of a group of 8 activists protesting the demolition of Palestinian homes in the Gaza Strip when she was killed. Her death came hours after an earlier incident that saw her pinned against a fence. She was killed after becoming trapped in dirt and debris. The bulldozer then ran over her before backing up and driving over her a second time. The court agreed with the Israeli army's conclusion that the driver's field of vision was limited, although activists testified that Corrie was wearing a high visibility vest and therefore easily visible.
So the Israeli court ended up blaming Rachel Corrie for her own death.
So there's this place in the Negev desert called Tel Beersheba.
Okay, this is another video. Okay, so that's the parents did not have any success in getting justice for her in the Israeli courts. So what they did was they set up the Rachel Corrie Foundation, which is quite a wonderful foundation. You can Google it and look it up. It does a lot of amazing work, and it gives a background of her death. And then it says, since her killing, an enormous amount of solidarity activities have been carried out in her name around the world. Rachel's journals and emails from her home from her time in Palestine are available in a variety of forms, published into books, plays, dramatic readings. Actually, the play that in New York, when they tried to have her play, they blocked her play from being performed in New York on Broadway. And they're collected here on the on this website, and they give you a whole list of places. And Rachel says, I should at least mention that I am also discovering a degree of strength and a basic ability for humans to remain human in the direst of circumstances, which I also haven't seen before. I think the word is dignity. I wish you could meet these people. Maybe, hopefully, someday you will. This was a letter she wrote to her mom. The Electronic Intifada has a lot of information, a detailed photo story, and a list of links particularly regarding the court actions and eyewitness accounts and official statements in numerous articles on Rachel Corrie. MIFTA has set up a tribute page. There's archives of articles here. And Electronic Intifada also keeps a list of all the archives. And The Death of Rachel Corrie is a wonderful song, David Rovics, we heard. And there's a bunch of poetry that has been dedicated to her. Many articles, theater notes. They have Rachel's words and prints, memorial archive, her court trial, and this is about what RCF is trying to do, what the mission of the Rachel Corrie Foundation is, and they are working for peace and justice in the world, and carry out her vision and her work, her spirit and creative energy. So they support programs that foster connections between people, not just in Palestine, but that build understanding, respect, and appreciation for differences, and that promote cooperation within and between local and global communities. The foundation encourages and supports grassroots efforts in pursuit of human rights and social, economic, and environmental justice, which we view as prerequisites for world peace. As they always say, no peace, no justice, no peace. And their foundation goals are education, connections, art, and the written word, and grassroots participation. And they have a list of guiding principles. So it's a very worthwhile organization. And I think that this week, if you are so moved to donate, make a donation to them, it certainly would be worthwhile. And they have international, they have employment opportunities and international volunteer opportunities, and a whole bunch of projects, Tale of Two Cities, Olympia to Rafah Foundation, Mural Project, Gaza Projects, Olympia Arab Festival, Peaceworks, and educational scholarships. They're involved with BDS, and they have a whole bunch of events. And of course, this week they were very active with events commemorating Rachel's death. So we pay great respect to the memory of Rachel, and we are grateful to her parents for setting up this foundation that had many events yesterday, and I posted our event today with them, and hopefully they will know that in New York, across the country, 3,000 miles away, they have a lot of support. The Electronic Intifada is key for her archive. They have the best archive of all of her work. So let's have a look at, and there's they commemorate Rachel today. They have commemoration this week for Rachel Corrie, but they have a bunch of other articles. Let's just quickly review them. And one good piece of news is that the French court throws out an Israeli instigated ban on a Palestinian event. This was just yesterday, and Hassan Hamouri holds a photo of his son, Salah Hamouri, the French Palestinian lawyer and political prisoner expelled by Israel in December. Since his return to France, Salah has faced continual harassment by the French government and the Israeli lobby. In an important victory for free speech and human rights in France, a court in the eastern city of Nancy overturned a government order banning an event featuring Salah Hamouri, the Palestinian French lawyer and former political prisoner who was expelled from Israel from his native Jerusalem. And the judge called the order a seriously manifest illegal violation of the right to free speech. So a little bit of good news from France. There's an interesting article on how fascism grips Israel, yet the United States clings to the two-state fantasy. Many protesters against the U.S. visit by Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, though certainly not all, hold expansionist views of Israel and think Israeli democracy is real. So there's this whole confusion about Israeli democracies. The Israelis are protesting the threats to their democracy, but few of them acknowledge the fact that this type of fascism has been the fate of the Palestinians for years, so that while they complain about the lack of their democracy, they are ignoring the Palestinians' democracy. However, there are those that have in these protests in Israel, there are those who have
very intelligent family.
who have talked about the Palestinian situation, and they want the end of the occupation. So the protesters themselves are divided. Now we're going to read about the Israeli. We know they killed last week in Nablus several protesters. Now, day before yesterday, they attacked Jenin. So the Israeli occupation forces killed 4 Palestinians, including a child, during a daytime raid in downtown Jenin. Videos recorded and eyewitness security systems show that the undercover Israeli forces extrajudicially executed at least one of those killed during the raid. Among those killed was Nidal Kazem, a 28-year-old field commander for the resistance faction Islamic Jihad. The slain fighter is a cousin of Rahat Kazem, who was killed in a shootout with police in Jaffa hours after killing 2 Israelis in Tel Aviv following a string of deadly attacks in Israel last year. The day after Rahat Kazem was killed, on 9th of April 2022, Ahmed Nasser al-Sadi, a field commander for Islamic Jihad, was killed by Israeli forces during a punitive home demolition raid targeting a house in Jenin. September last year, his brother was killed in Jenin in an apparent extrajudicial execution. The Qassam Brigades, the armed wing of Hamas, said that Youssef Saleh Sharayim, who was killed during Thursday's raid, was one of its commanders. The other slain Palestinians were identified as Omar Awadin, 14, and Louay al-Zugair, 37. Defense for the Children International said that Omar Awadin was shot by undercover forces while riding his bike outside his parents' shop. So this little 14-year-old Omar, Muhammad Omar Awadin, who was shot in the back with live ammunition riding his bike. So this is a terrible development. So we continue to mourn the loss of life and understand that every time these killings go on, more people plan revenge attacks. Another thing is interesting, that article on, this has been controversial in history, but the Zionists helped the Nazis perpetrate the Holocaust. There's another article about it. And there's a new book by Tony Greenstein's new book, who said from an early age, I had my doubts about Zionism. The son of an Orthodox Jewish rabbi, Greenstein has for decades been a tireless Palestinian solidarity activist and an uncompromising anti-Zionist. Greenstein explains cogently how he came to reject the ideology on which Israel was founded. He said, I found it difficult to reconcile Marxism, a universalist political ideology that believes in the unity of the oppressed and the working class, with Zionism, an exclusivist ideology. In school debate, he played devil's advocate and became convinced of the case against Zionism. And he's been writing for years. He said his doubt showed up after learning American Zionist leaders had opposed the entry of Jewish refugees from Europe during World War II. So the American Zionists helped the United States government, encouraged the United States government to stop Jewish refugees from coming into America. This I did not know. So began his lifelong project researching Zionist movements, collaboration with fascism. Greenstein has been writing about this topic for years. He's a contributor to the Electronic Intifada. It speaks volumes about the sorry state of British publishing that Greenstein has had to resort to self-publishing in Britain. Back in the 80s, Lenny Brenner's important book on the same topic was put into print by independently Scottish publishers. So Zionism during the Holocaust is breaking a long silence in print. And bringing up the story up to date, Greenstein's book is more comprehensive than Brenner's. He gives chapter and verse on the history of Zionist ideological affinity for European fascism. He explains how the Nazi leadership quoted Zionist sources to validate their claims that Jews could not be assimilated. Quoting pro-Israel historian Edwin Black, Greenstein writes, quote, "It was difficult for German Jews to refute Nazi claims, quote, when a loud and visible group of their own continually published identical indictments. Zionism had become a tool for anti-Semites. Zionism is at its heart racially exclusive ideology for the promotion of white supremacy, but it also wants a specific Jewish supremacy in Palestine." So this would be a very useful project. Let's see how long this. Oh, this is an hour long. All right, so this is an hour-long podcast on this topic, and I advise you to check it out on the electronic website. This is new information, and that's very important to understand the corruption of Zionism. So we are going to end with a beautiful song that was written. First, before we end, we're going to talk a little bit about Jewish Voice for Peace. And again, we have Jews in the forefront of resistance to Zionism and support for Palestine. And one of the great groups that had a huge demonstration last Sunday and is continually working every week with Women in Black is Jewish Voice for Peace. So let's hear them.
JVP has a plan to stop U.S. support for Israeli oppression of Palestinians. We're building an unstoppable movement of Jews, tech workers, students and elders, religious leaders, activists and allies, people just like you, who are committed to Palestinian liberation and a Judaism beyond Zionism. We need you. We must show up with our full hearts. We absolutely have to turn our outrage into action, demanding an end to Israeli apartheid. We're making big strides. We're changing hearts and minds all over the country. We're uniting and we will not stop. Those who back injustice tell lies to pit us against each other. They're desperate to distract and divide, because nothing is more terrifying to our opposition than the power we have when we join together. We can create a world where everyone lives in freedom, justice, and dignity, from the US to Palestine. But we can't do it without you. Join us.
So that's a little, but what's also good is to check out the Facebook page for Jewish Voice for Peace. And I think it's very important, particularly the rise of anti-Semitism, to not confuse anti-Semitism with pro-Palestinian attitudes, because there are many millions of Jews actually who support Palestine, both in Israel and in other parts of the world. The Jewish Voice for Peace page, Facebook page, has 667,000 followers. Okay, so we're talking about thousands and thousands of Jews who are fed up with Israel, with their violence, and who support the rights of Palestinian people. And here is the Jewish Voice for Peace commemorating Rachel Corrie. They said today, 20 years ago, Rachel Corrie's line was cut short while she was crushed to death by the Israeli bulldozer while defending a Palestinian home from demolition. So, so we see that Jewish Voice for Peace is commemorating Rachel Corrie's death, and that they have regular protests tomorrow, the Thursday, March 16th, protests to power hours for Palestinian action every other Thursday, beginning February 16th. And as Israeli state violence against Palestinians escalates in unprecedented levels, join these virtual 20-minute gatherings to learn the latest, take action, and connect with others to share your anger and resolve. So you can go online every 2 weeks with Jewish Voice for Peace, and here's some pictures from New York City. Huge demonstration, as I said last Sunday, against the business smoke track. The called for the against the demolition of buildings in Hawara, the murders of Janine, the novelist. So these are New York Jews out in hundreds of them protesting the Israeli government. So we know that the help is on the way. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of deaths in the meantime. So we're going to end with this beautiful song. Since it was St. Patrick's Day yesterday, it's appropriate to have an Irish song, a song by an Irish musician about Rachel Corrie to end our session today. So let's listen to this beautiful song by Paul Mock Adane.
To a story called about young Rachel Corrie, 23 years old, from Olympia in Washington. Rachel Corrie came, a bright young girl about to learn a world of hurt and pain. Rachel knew atrocities were committed in her name. She knew the US government had sharing all the blame. International solidarity called her from afar to a land of death and misery, a place they call afar. But don't you worry, Mama, I'm okay. I'm over here in Palestine, and I'll be back someday. Palestinian people are thoughtful and they're kind. I feel so guilty when I go and leave them all behind. For 7 weeks, she risked her life defending people's homes, trying to break down barriers in Israel's no-go zones. Tom Handel, we remember you for trying to do the same. Your pictures of the conflicts tell the world of Sharon's shame. But don't you worry, Mama, I'm okay. I'm over here in Palestine. I'll be back someday. Palestinian people are thoughtful and they're kind. I feel so guilty when I go and leave them all behind. One morning, Israel's army came to Haisalam to bulldoze Palestinian homes and make way for their plans. Rachel Corrie pleaded, she tried to talk them round, but the driver in a bulldozer mowed young Rachel down. But don't you worry, Mama, I'm okay. I'm over here in Palestine, and I'll be back someday. The Palestinian people are thoughtful and they're kind. I feel so guilty when I go and leave them all behind. I didn't know you, Rachel. I know what you stand for. You are an inspiration to end the bloody war. I hope the world will realize the reasons why you died. Equality, fraternity, for liberty and pride. Equality, fraternity, for liberty and pride.
Wow, how beautiful. So we'll end with a celebration of the Irish for St. Patrick's Day, who is commemorating the martyrdom of Rachel Corrie. Welcome, Jose, to our show. So thank you, everyone, for joining today. It's been a really sad time to think about Rachel and think about how many people don't even know who she is. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do maybe is just go around with a video camera and ask people if they know who Rachel Corrie is and what she did. And in her honor and her inspiration, we offer this time together with a shared resolution to continue to help the Palestinian people for whom she gave her life. So thank you for joining me, and I wish you all well and have a safe week, and let's keep praying for Palestine, for peace in Palestine. Ma salama. Shukran.